Last year, I went on a road trip with my girlfriend. We were taking a vacation, but we chose to drive instead of flying. We did that because we could stop more places and explore, and also because it was cheaper. This was the second road trip that we had taken together, and the first one was a lot of fun, so we were looking forward to it. When the road trip started, the first day of driving went by really well. We stopped at a few cool places and explored around some towns. Then we made it to our hotel for the night. The next day, we got up bright and early in the morning and hit the road. We were hoping to make it all the way to our destination by that night. It was a long day of driving, but overall it was fun. However, we ended up driving sort of late into the night. By about 10 p.m., we still had another hour and a half left. I was driving and I decided to stop at the next gas station because we were running a little low. Plus, I wanted to get a coffee and some snacks, and my girlfriend wanted coffee as well. So at the next exit, I pulled off of the highway that we were on. There was a pretty large truck stop, it appeared, with a gas station and store attached. When I arrived there, I first put more fuel into the car, and then I went and parked next to the store. There were a decent number of other cars and trucks around, and this was clearly a pretty popular place for people to stop. So my girlfriend and I got out of the car and started walking in. I do remember that as we were walking in, a few other people were as well, including a family with a few children a little bit ahead of us. We got inside of the store and first used the restrooms. Then my girlfriend said that she would get the coffee if I wanted to look for some snacks. The store was very large for a truck stop. It had quite a few aisles, and there was a coffee shop type of place attached to it, which is where my girlfriend went. So I started to walk through the snack aisles and think about what I wanted to get. It was a few minutes into that I noticed a man and a child start to walk into the aisle that I was in. The man was a bit larger of a guy who appeared to be in his 40s or so, and the child looked to be about 5 or 6. The man was holding onto the kid's hand, and it seemed as though after they saw me in the aisle, they turned around and walked out. But when I looked at the kid, I remembered seeing him walking into the store with the family ahead of us. I had seen the kid's parents, and this guy was not one of them. I got a bad feeling, like maybe this guy was trying to kidnap the kid or something. I thought about it for a moment, and I was 90% sure that this kid didn't belong to him, and the way that the man was holding on to the child's hand seemed almost like he was dragging him along. I decided to go and see where the guy was going, so I walked over to the end of the aisle. I didn't immediately see the man, so I scanned around the store. Then I noticed him walking along the backside of the store near the cold drinks. He was still with the child. After making it to the corner of the store, he walked along the next side of it going towards the exit doors. When I saw this, I walked forward and I reached the doors before the man would. Soon, the man and the child reached me. I remember that the man said, "Excuse me," and started to walk around me, but I said, "Wait a minute." The man stopped and looked at me. His face appeared nervous. I flat out asked him if that was his kid, and I said that I saw the child enter with other parents. The man said yes, it was his son. I looked to the boy, who seemed shy and a little bit confused. I asked if that was his dad, and he shook his head saying no. The man then started to open the door anyways and tried to leave with the kid. By now, we had been standing there for almost a minute. I spoke louder, saying that I just wanted the other people to come over and confirm if it was their kid or not. Before I got done speaking though, the man suddenly let go of the child and just ran out the door. I watched him walk at an extremely fast pace to this old-looking van and get inside of it. I tried looking for the license plate number, but I couldn't see good enough. Then I walked with the child around the store until we finally found his parents. When I found them, I told them what happened. They were obviously upset, but also grateful. The parents had 3 other kids, and one of the older children apparently was supposed to be watching the younger one. I'm not sure where the man had come from, but I'm really glad that he didn't leave with the child. The police got called and there was a big investigation. My girlfriend and I then went back onto the road. A couple of years ago, I took a road trip all by myself out to California. One of my good friends moved out there, and I had never been there before. So I wanted to visit and also see some cool places in California and experience it. I was going to drive there in about 2 days. On the first day, I drove from sun up to sundown and even past that. I stopped a few times for food and stuff, but for the most part, I drove the whole time. I had booked a hotel online, and I had the address of it on my phone. By the time that I was about 30 minutes out from the hotel, it was probably about 10:30 p.m. I knew that I was going to be taking an exit up ahead in like 20 miles or so. As some more time went by, I felt like the exit should be approaching. I looked at my phone to see how close it was, and just as I looked at it, I saw the phone turn off like it had died. I tried turning it back on, but I realized that it was in fact dead. I had a car charger, but it had been having some problems recently at the time. It was one of those old chargers that sometimes it randomly wouldn't work, or you would have to mess around with it a while before it worked. So I got the charger and tried plugging it into the phone and turning it on, but nothing happened. I kept driving and saw some exits coming up. I just guessed that these were the ones that I was supposed to take. I didn't know for sure, but I was hoping that I would be correct. Maybe if I drove down the exit, I would see the hotel or a sign for it or something. So I took the exit and went to the right. I passed by an old gas station, but that was about it. As I continued to drive down this road, things were much quieter there. The roads didn't have any other cars on them at all. I drove along the road for probably 2 or 3 miles. At that point, I realized that I didn't really know where I was going, and I had probably taken the wrong exit. I wanted to figure it out though, so I pulled over to the side of the road that I was on. Then I took the charger and tried to figure out what was wrong. I unplugged it, plugged it back in, and started moving it around, trying to get it to work. I sat there in my car for a few minutes trying everything I could to get the charger to charge my phone, but nothing seemed to do it. It seemed as though that charger had finally bit the dust for good. I realized that I would have to buy a new one, but still, I had to get to the hotel and I didn't even know where it was. I remember I looked up though, and suddenly I saw headlights that a car had pulled over to the side of the road behind me. It was several car lengths back, and at first I thought that maybe it was police, but looking at the headlights, it didn't really seem like a police car. Plus, there were no flashing red and blue lights, just normal headlights. I waited for a minute or two to see if anybody would get out or something. They didn't though. Then I decided to merge back onto this quiet road. There were literally no other cars around, just us 2 cars pulled over on the side of the road right here. It was really strange. I didn't know why this person had pulled over, and on both sides of the road it was just wildland and woods. So I put my car in drive and slowly went back out onto the road. When I did, I noticed that almost immediately after me, the car behind me did the same. This gave me a bad feeling. Why would this person want to follow me? I should have turned around and went back to the highway right then and there, but I didn't. The fact that the car behind me left right after me got me distracted. I kept going down that road for a little while, and at the first opportunity to turn that I had, I took it. I wanted to see what the car would do behind me. When I turned, the car did as well. Now I was really worried. I drove down this other random road for a while, and then I turned again. The car behind me did that as well. I really wanted to get away from it. This road was even more secluded though. There were no streetlights, and the only visibility was coming from my headlights and the ones of the car following me. I knew that I had to turn around and go back to the highway. It felt really sketchy trying to get away from this guy on these roads, so I decided to make a U-turn. I slowed down and went as far as I could to the right side of the road. The car behind me started to slow down as well. Then I began turning around to make the U-turn. I slowed down significantly more, but I was just able to make it. However, when I turned around, I realized that the car behind me had actually backed up. It was now parked in a way where the car was blocking almost the entire width of the road. I stopped. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't think I would be able to get around the car. Then the car turned off and I saw the driver's door open up. A man got out. He did not look friendly at all. He started instantly jogging towards my driver's side door. In an instant, I went to the right and just hit the gas. It was really just a reaction to the guy running at me. I drove right into the grass and just barely squeaked around the man's car. Luckily, my car did not get stuck in the grass, and I soon went back onto the road. I saw the guy was running back for his car, so I went faster, and as soon as I made it to the next turn, I took it. Then I took this other road that was right off of that one. I knew the guy would be coming for me, but at the moment I could not see him. So I went down that road a little ways, and then I pulled over and turned my lights off. I just hoped that the guy wouldn't go down that road. I waited for probably 10 minutes and I didn't see the car. so he must have not known that I had went down that second road. After that, I carefully drove back towards the highway again. I was able to make it, and then I was able to use the signs to get to the correct exit. I stopped at a gas station, bought a new charger, and then was able to make it to my hotel. Looking back, I don't know who that guy was, why he followed me, or what he wanted. I don't think it was anything good though, and I'm really glad that I got away from him. I'm a female, and I went to a college that was really far away from where I was from. It was several states away, and every time I went to and from college, it would be a bit of a road trip. One time in particular, I was coming home for the summer. It was a 10-hour drive, and there were actually a couple of times where I did the whole drive in one day, but this time I was going to be making it in two. I was going to stop at a hotel when it got really late, so that first day, I drove for a really long time until it got late and I couldn't go any further. I was really tired, and it was probably like 11 o'clock. I was still a good 4 hours or so from home, so I decided to stop for some sleep. First though, I went to a gas station. It was a larger one that was probably very common for people on road trips to stop at. There were quite a few trucks parked in the back for the night. I had to use the restroom, so I parked and got out, then went inside of the store. There were a few other people inside, probably on road trips like me. I remember that after using the bathroom, I got an energy drink, and I saw that there was just one person working at the registers. There was a line of a few people waiting to check out. So I got in line, and then I remembered that this one guy got in line behind me. When he did, he tapped me on the shoulder and started talking to me. The guy had sort of long hair, was wearing a hat, and kind of had a gruff look to him. He was holding a 6-pack of natural light beer, and after saying hi to me, he asked if I was on a road trip. I said yes, I was going home from college. The man asked me where I was from, and I told him. Then, surprisingly, he asked me if I needed a ride. I said no, and I was confused, because I had literally just told him that I was on a road trip. He continued to talk to me though, asking me several more random questions before it was my turn to check out. After I did, I walked back to my car. I remember that when I got to my car, I noticed the man leaving the store with the beer and cigarettes as well. He walked to this blue, really rusty old pickup truck that was parked sort of far away from my car. I then started up my car to leave, but realized that I was sort of low on gas, so I decided to fill up now so I wouldn't have to do it in the morning. I backed up to an open gas pump and then fueled my car. Afterwards, I drove to a nearby motel. It was just this cheap motel, and it was a pretty short ways down the street. I arrived, checked in, and then got my room key and went to my room and got ready for bed. I remember that right before going to sleep, I decided to check out the front window. It was one of those motels that just has a sidewalk in front of the rooms and then the parking lot is right there. The window was completely covered, but when I moved the cover and I looked out, I saw the rusty blue truck. It was parked just in the parking lot in front of my room. Then I noticed that the same guy was in the driver's seat of it. Maybe this was just a coincidence, but it seemed a little bit strange. I went away from the window, got in bed, and then tried falling asleep. I was pretty tired and was able to fall asleep pretty quickly, but sometime in the night, I woke up. I just remembered that after I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the sound of somebody trying to open the door to my room. I was suddenly wide awake. The person tried the door a few times and then stopped. After not hearing anything for a few moments, I got up and went over to the door. I looked through the peephole but saw nothing, but I did hear a car door closing a distance away in the parking lot, so I went over and looked out of the window. When I did, I saw that nobody was at the door anymore. Then I looked to the blue truck and saw that the man was inside of it and in the driver's seat. That had to have been him. If he had a room here, why wouldn't he be in it? I went over to the phone in the motel room and I called the front desk, but nobody answered. I was considering calling the police. I went over to the bed and sat down, trying to relax. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning by now. After laying down and going on my phone a little bit, I was starting to feel better. Then, suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. Once again, I was instantly on edge. I listened, and after a few moments, whoever was there knocked again. I quietly got up and walked over to the door. After looking through the peephole, I saw the same man was there. Then I went back over to the bed and called the police. I told them what was going on. After I was told they were on the way, I hadn't heard the knocking or anything in a few minutes. I went back over to the window and looked out. The man was still there and still inside of his truck. Then I just had to wait for police. I kept watching out the window the entire time. After about 5 minutes or so, I saw a police car entering the parking lot. Right when it did, the truck that the man was in started up and began to drive away. The police car noticed this and put on its flashing lights. They both then drove out of my sight. However, about 10 minutes later, another police officer showed up and knocked on my door. He told me that the police had pursued the rusty truck and stopped it. The man was arrested for drunk driving as well as having other drugs in the car. He denied trying to enter my room, but admitted to knocking on the door. I was just glad that he was off the streets for the night. The next morning, I was able to make it back home. That was definitely my scariest road trip experience. A few years back, I went on a road trip. I travel quite a bit for work, and I end up driving all around the country. So on this particular road trip, I found myself driving in sort of the middle of nowhere really late at night. I'm pretty good at staying awake and driving at all kinds of hours, but I need the help of caffeine to do so. So when I sensed that I was starting to get a little bit sleepy, I knew that I needed to stop. If I got out of the car, walked around a little, and had a caffeinated beverage, I would be fine. So after driving down the highway for a few more miles, I saw the sign for a rest stop up ahead. I was happy to see this, and I pulled off. This rest stop was right off the highway, and I mean literally right off of it. The exit went right into the parking lot, and then you had to go back onto the highway. There were no other roads. There was also a small woods in the area of land between the stop and the highway. When I pulled in, I noticed that there were 0 other cars around. The rest stop building was also fairly small. I parked my car right in front of the building, got out, and looked around. It was really dark, but there was one dim street lamp a little ways away. Around the building was a little bit of open grass, and then woods on basically all sides of it. The cool air outside felt refreshing, and after stretching my legs, I walked inside of the rest stop. It was an older building. Inside, there was a small lobby with a vending machine and some maps. The restrooms were straight ahead, and then to the right, there was what appeared to be an old restaurant. It was one of those small pizza places that you would sometimes see in rest stops or travel centers, but it was now abandoned, and it looked like it had been for several years. It was sort of spooky. After briefly looking around inside, I figured that I would get something from the vending machine, but first I went into the restroom and used it. While I was in there, I heard footsteps outside in the lobby of the rest stop building. I figured somebody else had stopped. The person did not enter the restroom though. When I came out of the restroom like 30 seconds later, I didn't see anybody. I went over to the vending machine, got a drink, and then casually walked around a little. I looked out the window and then noticed that my car was still the only one in the entire parking lot. This was strange. I was sure that I heard somebody else inside the building, but where would they have come from? I walked over to the abandoned restaurant, and when I did, I thought I saw somebody moving quickly behind the old counter. It was really dark over there, so I didn't see well. But if somebody was over there and seemingly hiding, I didn't want to get involved. I decided at that point to just leave. So I turned and I started walking for the doors. When I was almost there though, I heard footsteps behind me, like whoever was back there was now leaving as well. After I got out of the doors and was approaching my car, I heard the person leave as well, and they seemed to be moving quickly. I stopped and turned around to look at them. It was a man. He was pretty thin, but kind of tall. He was really creepy looking and had long stringy hair. The guy was headed right towards me and approaching in a really aggressive way. I wouldn't be able to get inside my car on time before he reached me, so I decided to just run. I turned and I just sprinted through the parking lot. I ran all the way to the other side. At first, the guy started chasing after me, but he soon stopped. When I got to the far end of the parking lot, I turned around and I looked. The man was standing right next to my car. I couldn't go back to it. I kept walking, and then I went into the grass. Then I entered the woods. I just wanted to get out of the guy's view. After walking through the thick woods for a little while, I called 911. After speaking with the operator, I told them my location and what was going on. Then I waited. I could not see the guy from where I was because I was that deep in the woods. Finally, I could sort of see flashing red and blue lights. I came out from the woods and I saw a police car next to my car. An officer left his vehicle and started walking behind the building. After a while, he came back over to me. He said that when he got there, he thought he saw somebody running behind the building. He went back there though and couldn't find the person. He figured they were deep in the woods by then. I talked to him about the situation. He said that he would call another nearby unit and they would check behind the building again, but that I could go. So after that, I was on my way. I'm not sure if the police found the man or not. I'm guessing that he was going to try to steal my car, but who knows? I'm really glad that I got away from him.
This happened in September of 2022, and at the time I lived in Wisconsin. I was also a sophomore in high school. I met a 17-year-old named Austin at my summer job. He used to attend the same high school as me, but had been expelled for plagiarism. That's what he told me, and I didn't question it. You can be thrown out of a university for plagiarizing someone else's work, but high school would put you into detention at worst, leading me to believe that he was kicked out for a different reason. We became friendly, and he would pick me up and drop me off during the summer whenever we had work, because I didn't have a driver's license at the time. I also want to point out that it was pretty obvious that he had a crush on me, but I didn't feel the same way about him. To clarify, he insisted on giving me a ride, and I even offered to give him money to cover gas. I was not leading him on in any way. Fast forward to the second or third week of school. Austin and I were driving home from a party that a mutual friend from school was throwing. Again, I needed a ride. When Austin pulled up to my house to drop me off, he finally popped the question. "Hey, listen, I think you and I should go out sometime." I'm sorry, Austin. I just don't have those kind of feelings for you. I would prefer if we stayed friends." I could tell that my response really upset him. Looking back, I can see how he may have gotten the wrong idea. Please try not to judge me too harshly. The only excuse I have was that I was only a teenager back then. We waved goodbye to each other, and I went inside my house, took off my shoes, changed into my pajamas, brushed my teeth, and was ready to call it a night. Before I fell asleep, I got a text from a friend. What I read on screen is something I'll never forget. It was a paragraph-long message about how Austin had been secretly taking photos of me while I was sleeping in my bed, through my window. While that revelation was still sinking in, several photos of me sleeping came through. Apparently, Austin had been bragging about it at the party, and even showed off his collection, which found their way back to me. When you're hit with news like that, you feel cold. I knew that Austin had a thing for me, but I didn't think it would ever be something this twisted. On top of that, I was literally in the exact spot of where the photos were taken. The first thing I did was check my window and close my blinds. I then immediately sent him a text in all caps. "Never contact me again." He seemed to know right away why I said that to him, and quickly began to apologize and started playing the victim card. I felt like screaming after reading his pathetic texts, and then told him, "Lose my number and never speak to me again." Then I blocked him. I wasn't feeling tired anymore, and I got up to take some melatonin so I could fall asleep. I don't know how long I was out for, but I woke up to the sound of my window shattering. I sat up in bed to see a dark figure stepping through. I quickly got out of bed and ran toward the door. The figure moved to catch me, but slipped on a piece of broken glass and fell to the floor. When I looked back, I could see that the intruder was in fact Austin, and that he also had a knife in his hand. I started to scream hysterically. My dad quickly came out into the hallway, asking me what the hell was going on. All I could do was point to my bedroom door. When he rushed inside, Austin was gone. After I told my father who it was, he immediately called the police, and they arrived 10 minutes later, along with the paramedics. I didn't know it at first, but when I rushed out of my bedroom, my feet were cut on the broken glass. I had lost a lot of blood and was now feeling dizzy. After I told the police my side of the story, the paramedics ended up taking me to the hospital, where I stayed overnight. It took the cops a while to track down Austin, but they eventually arrested him. During his sentencing, he addressed the court and admitted that he didn't know why he did it, and also expressed that he was in love with me. Austin was convicted of multiple felony charges. The prosecutor was able to uncover more evidence that proved he intended to kill me, so the final verdict was breaking and entering and attempted first-degree murder. A year later, he successfully appealed the murder charge. I don't know all the details, but his mental health and lack of criminal record before that night played a major factor. Austin is currently serving a 16-year prison sentence. Although justice has been served, I still get very skittish whenever I meet new people, especially men. I know I sound crazy, but I still have a lot of PTSD over what happened that night. I hope Austin goes to hell for what he did.
My wife passed away over 15 years ago, caused by a drunk driver. After mourning for several long years, I decided that I'd try online dating to get my dating life back up and running. This was in the early 2000s, so the world of online dating was just being introduced. I signed up for Match.com, filled out the usual forms, and chose some photos of myself I thought looked presentable. Within a day, I had matched with a woman with similar interests. She had claimed to be just a little younger than I was, lived in the same town, and while she wasn't a 10 out of 10, she wasn't ugly. Her name was Alexa, and we hit it off well. We started off as online friends, but as time went on, I started to see her something more than a friend. I decided I wanted to meet her, so I grew some balls and asked her out. Alexa, would you be interested in grabbing a drink at, say, the local bar? Alexa replied saying that she'd be happy to. She knew of my family's situation about the passing of my wife, so she was very patient and understanding with me. The local bar is this country-styled pub where everyone in town hangs out. Before social media, the bar is how you knew where everyone was at. It was sort of the spot that only locals knew about. Our town doesn't get many tourists, so everyone pretty much knew each other. The bar is also a major gossip spot. We're a small town, so there are no secrets. Even the state police stop there, as well as truckers and stuff like that. I made a few trucker friends here and there and pretty much got along with everyone. Alexa and I agreed to meet the next day, so I had to make sure I was ready for it. I haven't been on a first date in years, so I was understandably nervous as hell. I got cleaned up, made sure I had enough money, car was cleaned, and the usual pre-date preparations. The bar is only about 5 minutes from my house, so I get there a few minutes early to get situated. When I walk in and look around, Alexa was nowhere to be seen. I assume she must have been running late, so I took that chance to find a table and text her saying that I was here. Everyone in the bar began to stare and make comments on how I was dressed. The server, Gabriella, was a 19-year-old college student who is also the owner's daughter. Remember when I said the bar is a gossip spot? If you want to know what's going on, you ask Gabby. When times were slow at the bar, Gabby would go online and dig up some research about criminals and anything weird that goes on. They even have a bulletin board with pictures of all criminals and local pedophiles. Like I said, small town, no secrets. Gabby comes over to me commenting about the way I was dressed and asked if I was on a hot date. When I told her that I was, she had asked if she could see a picture of my lady friend, and when I showed her, she got this strange look on her face. She muttered a nice comment and left to go get my drink. This was unusual for Gabby because she chats everyone's ears off. So much that she sometimes forgets to give people their orders. I got a message from Alexa saying she was 10 minutes away and that she was caught in traffic. It was then when I noticed Gabby talking to other patrons, only for all of them to constantly glance over to me with this look I can't even explain. As I looked around the bar, I noticed that everyone would look away when I made eye contact with them. I got another text from Alexa saying that she was 5 minutes away. Gabby comes back with my drink and asks if she could see the picture of Alexa again. I gladly showed her. After seeing it again, she asks me, "You know who that is, don't you?" It's Alexa," I replied. That's a guy dressed up as a woman. This guy likes to stalk people and lure them into taking people's money. He got out of jail 6 months ago for good behavior." I blurted out a "what the hell" as she said this. As it turns out, this guy enjoyed seeking pleasure of preying upon lonely men, just like me. He was the black sheep from a very influential family that had relatives in law enforcement, local papers, county councils, the judicial system, and even school board positions. Alexa was charged with both stalking men and women on dating sites and would sometimes even go into their homes only to steal all of their valuables. Apparently, he even broke into the victims' homes before targeting them. From what Gabby had told me, he was in jail for 2 years and was released but given a deal from the county attorney's office with the following conditions. 1. Not to use dating sites. 2. Mandated management counseling to control his impulse. 3. To wear a monitoring device so he couldn't go back to his victims' homes. 4. Never to contact any of the victims. 5. He would be on probation for 4 years. Gabby had told me that she had called the police as this guy wasn't supposed to be on any dating sites. The police also requested for me to act calm and natural until they got there. I thought to myself, act calm? How the hell am I supposed to remain calm when this guy is dressed up like, and sounds like, a woman was hitting on me? I was beyond furious. I couldn't even find the right words to use to describe what I was feeling. However, I wanted to keep the peace, so I tried to pull myself together not to erupt into a raging madman. Right then, I received another text from her saying she was parking, and it was at that point where I wanted to go outside and kill the bastard. Gabby had told me that one of the truckers would protect me if things went south. A few seconds later, the door to the bar opened and the woman from Match.com appeared. A dead silence came over the bar. I waved half-heartedly while trying to keep my composure so I wouldn't find myself breaking his jaw. Gabby very formal and politely walks up to Alexa asking if she needed a table. Alexa replies, "Oh, no, there's my date, over there." Just as that was said, 2 county sheriff cars pull in and the Alexa imposter flees running out the door. He didn't get very far though. One of the officers got out and body slammed him to the ground. All the while, Alexa tried convincing the police that he was in fact a woman by faking the female voice I was all too familiar with. He was arrested and put in jail much longer than before. From that day forward, I swore to myself that I would never go on another online dating site again. I'm a 20-year-old college student, and this recently happened to me a few months ago. My dating life hasn't always been the best, but I've been with a few girls here and there. This was primarily because I didn't have the time to date, as my life was basically revolving around school. I'm currently majoring in engineering, so you could imagine how much schoolwork I was swamped with. Anyway, I had been at my friend's dorm one night who had just introduced me to his new girlfriend. They had apparently met over a dating site called Plenty of Fish, an app I've never heard of. She was nice, but as the night progressed, I started to become jealous of my friend's relationship. My desire to meet someone grew stronger than ever, and so I decided to try out online dating myself. I've never done online dating before, so all of it was new to me. My friend had recommended Plenty of Fish, as it was apparently the most reliable site out there. Just gotta say, paying $30 for a membership on a dating site is outrageous. I paid the fee and began creating my profile with info and pictures of me. The first week on the app, I matched with absolutely no one. The very few women I did match with either didn't bother messaging me back or were bots. This was one of the big reasons as to why I was not a fan of online dating. Reliable my ass. After a few days of getting basically zero attention, I sort of stayed off the app for a good while and continued with my normal life. About 2 weeks later, I'm at the movies with my friends when I get a notification from Plenty of Fish. I opened the message to see that I had matched with this really cute girl who was just a bit younger than I was. She attended the same university as me and didn't live too far. She had messaged me wanting to know more about me and referred to me as a hunk. Hunk is slang for basically saying someone is attractive or good looking. Being the ecstatic guy I was, I gladly reply and tell her more about myself. My friends make a few comments about her, telling me how I was lucky and how I'd get laid. The usual comments close friends would sort of make. The person I had matched with was named Samantha, and we really seemed to connect. She was a gamer like myself, and we both shared similar interests, which is what made us connect even more. We chatted through the app for a good few days and eventually led to SMS. Nothing was out of the ordinary, just casual talk and the iMessage games we played. However, little did I know that would all change in just one night when Samantha started being sexual with me. Of course, being the hormone-filled young adult I was, I decided to play along. We played it safe by sending photos of us removing our clothing until I eventually sent her a nude. Nothing really happened the rest of the night, but I noticed that she wasn't texting me the next day at all. This was unusual for her, as she's normally very responsive and fast. At one point, I was sitting at my desk studying for my midterm when I received a call from her. She had never called me before, so I was kinda surprised, but picked up and greeted her. There was a long pause before I hear someone on the other end. However, on the other end was not Samantha at all. The voice on the other end was a man's voice saying, "What are pictures of you doing on my 15-year-old daughter's phone?" I felt my blood run cold and hung up the call immediately and deleted everything dating related from my phone. I was in a panic as I knew hanging up was the wrong move. Did this girl lie about her age? Was I a victim of some sort of trick? Then, all of a sudden, a text from her contact pops up that read, "You better call me back or you'll be in a prison cell within an hour." All I can remember was explaining to the supposed father that I didn't know she was underage and that her profile said she was 19. All I got in response, though, was how I was a monster, a pedophile, and how he was gonna lock me up. For a second, I really thought about my life being over. All my hard work and education being ruined because of this. He then presented me with a proposal. If I would send this man $1,000 for the deactivation of his daughter's phone, he won't call the cops. At the time, my bank account had about $700 in savings. It was my savings for a car, but I was prepared to give it to him if that meant I didn't have to be put behind bars. I had asked if I could call my family to help pay the remaining $300, and he said yes. After a whole ordeal with my parents, they sent me the rest of the money, but that my dad wanted to talk to this man. I'd say my dad sent over 100 messages to this man, threatening him in the worst way possible. All we got in response was that he hoped I would enjoy prison. My parents said I didn't have to worry about it as this was all likely a scam, an attempt to extort me because I was so young and naive. For the next couple weeks, I was paranoid that a police officer would come to my door with a pair of handcuffs with my name on them. However, no one ever came. The number I had saved for this guy ended up being disconnected after a week. Till this day, I still wonder if it really was just a ploy. Even if it was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. And if it wasn't, I guess it technically means that I'm guilty, even though I really never knew her real age. My parents are convinced that it was indeed a scam. I hope that you'll use my story as a sort of lesson to be learned about scams like this and the dangers of online dating. Be careful out there, folks. For the past year, I've been on a lot of online dating apps nonstop. I had recently broke up with my boyfriend due to his toxic behavior and knew I had to find someone else who would benefit me in life. Being a girl who had already graduated college, it was hard to find new people, so I turned to online dating. Sites like Tinder, OkCupid, Bumble, etc. One day, I had matched with a guy named Zach on Tinder who I enjoyed talking to really well. Based on his profile picture, he seemed cute and confident about his career and hobbies. We had messaged back and forth, and at one point he wanted to meet me. I've never been involved with the dating life since college, so I was very nervous. I told him that he could come over to my house as my parents were out of town and we could have the place to ourselves. He agreed with that idea and made plans for him to come over during the weekend. When the day finally came to meet Zach, I cleaned the house, dressed nice, and even made some fresh brownies for us. Fast forward to 3 p.m., I hear a knock at the door and go over to open it. Standing at the front of the door was a man I had never seen before greeting me. However, it was not at all Zach, and he didn't even look like him. He wore torn and dirty clothing and looked like he hadn't been to the gym in years. When I questioned him about why he lied about the photos, he said that was actually pictures of his nephew. At this point, I'm immediately creeped out, but I didn't want to be rude and kick him out. We both agreed to watch a movie on the couch, and I made sure to stay far away from him as possible. During the movie, I felt his eyes stare at me in this weird way I didn't understand. It was as if he were staring through my soul. It came to a point where I made up a lie saying that my parents were coming home and that he had to leave. Thankfully, he respected this and got up to leave. Before he did, he took out a pocket knife and said something that made my skin crawl. "I could have killed you today, Ashley." He jokingly chuckled as he made his way out of my house and into his old pickup truck. I never heard from Zach again, but this is one of the creepiest moments I've ever experienced. I'm now more aware of online dating, and I'll just stick to meeting people in real life. In 2011, I moved to a college in Colorado during the winter for my master's degree in psychology. The school had a really good program, and a master's was mandatory for my career. My financial aid covered housing, and I had a single dorm that sat right on the edge of campus. Most of my classmates were nice, and my professors were some of the best, especially at an Ivy League school. Mid-semester, I had my midterm coming up and had a lot of homework to do. Living in a one-bedroom dorm with basically no friends, I decided that I'd take a walk to the woods beside the dorms. It was nicknamed Jordan's Forest. I still don't know who Jordan was or why it was called that, but a lot of students would commonly go there to smoke and stuff. I was never into that and hoped for a moment to myself with nobody around. So anyway, there I am, heading down the trail, keeping to myself when I decide to sit down by the old fountain hidden deeper into the woods. Apparently the fountain used to belong to a fraternity at one point. However, I guess they haven't used it in a while, as the fountain was hanging by a thread and appeared to have been unkept for years. As I'm sitting by the fountain, just reflecting on life, I hear footsteps in the snow from behind me. I turn around, and standing there is a man with a jacket and hat on. He gives me a friendly gesture as a way to say hello, and me, being the shy person I was, gave him a quick smile. He then comes up to me and introduced himself as Doug. As I said, I wanted to be alone with myself at the moment, and having someone else nearby really killed the mood. However, I didn't want to come off as rude, so I tell him my name and went on my phone to act busy. Right away, something seemed off about him, and he didn't exactly look like a college student. If I had to guess, I'd say he had to be in his late 30s or maybe early 40s. He proceeds to sit down beside me while keeping a short distance before saying, "So, is this your first time on campus?" he said. "Yeah, I just started my master's," I said. He looks at me with a smirk and says, "Oh, I see. Well, you'll love it here. You seem so young and bright. You do fine." I thank him for the compliment and tend to my phone to try and talk to him the least I could, hoping he'd get the hint. After some minor small talk, I finally say it's getting colder and that I was gonna head back to my dorm. As I'm walking away, I could just feel his eyes glued to the back of me, and the minute I turned around, I saw him staring at me. It wasn't until then where I started walking a little faster, hoping he wasn't following me. When I created a safe enough distance, I checked behind me once more and didn't see him. I breathed a sigh of relief and entered my dorm to continue studying for my midterm. However, as I was studying, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. I'm not one to be judgmental or anything, but he didn't strike me as a student at all. I'm not saying older people don't go back to school, they do, but there was indeed something off about him. I studied for another 2 hours or so when I decide to call it there and settle in for the night. I freshen up in the shower when my friend from my home state calls me via FaceTime. This is someone who I haven't spoken to in weeks, so I step out of the shower with my robe on and gladly answer it. She was mentioning about how she got a new job and how she just moved in with her boyfriend. Basically, a bunch of life stuff. We're talking on the phone for a good hour or so when I decide to lean my phone against some books so the camera is on me. She continues her story and such when she suddenly stops mid-sentence and looks at me strangely. When I ask her what was wrong, she says that there's someone looking into my room from the window. My blood ran cold, and I turn around and see what I can only describe as Doug peeking through my window. The second he spots me, he ducks down out of view. I begin telling my friend that I had met this man earlier and didn't know who he was. She recommended I call campus security, and I did just that. I even had my friend still on the phone with me as a way to make me feel like I was with someone. As I'm on the phone with security, I hear my doorknob start to move and someone trying to open it. Thankfully it was locked, but I'll never forget the voice Doug made while trying to open my door. It was this low and gravelly voice, telling me that he could easily break this door down with one kick. I'll admit, I started to shed tears right then, just wanting security to get here. When they did, they had arrived with the police who then placed him under arrest. Turns out Doug had actually been a student here once and has since been homeless for over 5 years. His girlfriend died while they were both in school and had chose to live near campus as a way to cope, as this was the last memory of her and him together. I will say I did feel some sympathy for him, but I couldn't allow him to continue what he did to me to others. Up until recently, he was released from prison for good behavior, and the university has since banned him from being on campus grounds. I graduated with honors a year later, and I haven't returned to campus since. I'm a 27-year-old male now, but the story takes place when I was around 14 or so. I lived in North Carolina, and I've lived there my whole life, even when this happened. I'm not a huge guy by any means, so at 14, I was thin as a toothpick with little to no muscle. This will be important in the story later. The following events took place around early December of 2011. It was late at night in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was home alone. My mom was working in urgent care that night, and my dad was out of state on a business trip for work. Seeing as my mom worked late, I had the house to myself, and with it being winter break, I spent most of my night playing video games. Everything from COD all the way to Minecraft. After playing for quite some time, I take a look at the time and see that it's well past 9 p.m. Me, being the skinny kid I was, decided to head downstairs and fix myself a snack. As I'm heating up my food, I looked to my left and noticed the door that led into the basement was open. Now, my family is very strict when it came to leaving doors open, and I always made sure to close them. Mind you, I rarely go into the basement, so I was surprised that my parents left it open. Having OCD myself, I prefer things organized, so I went over to close the door when my heart sank. I almost didn't notice it, but at the end of the stairs was a black figure sitting on the bottom step. By some stupid luck, he was facing the other way, so he didn't see me. I felt my heart legitimately sink into the pit of my stomach as I realized what was happening. While I didn't see their face, I did see the back of them. They appeared to be male and wore torn clothing with gray, messy hair. With not many options to choose from, I run upstairs and hide under my bed, not making a sound. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, and I sure as hell wasn't going into the kitchen to get the home phone. With nothing to do, I just stayed in my room, hiding under my bed, when I hear footsteps coming up the basement stairs. At this point, I knew whoever this person was knew I was here. In my innocent 14-year-old head, I prayed he would just leave if he knew there was someone else here. However, that simply wasn't the case. Instead of accepting that there was someone else here, he took it a step further and proceeded to walk upstairs to my room. I hear him coming, and I come up from under my bed, with my mind racing on what to do. Now, this is where my lack of strength comes into play. I was trapped in my room, I didn't have a weapon, and I wasn't sure what this person was capable of doing. With no other option, I go to my window and attempt to open it as a way to escape. However, the cold weather from outside made it more difficult for me to open the window as the frame was basically frozen. All the while, I'm trying to get it open and I hear the footsteps walk up the stairs and stop at my door. He then proceeds to knock, followed by him mumbling something I couldn't understand. What freaked me out the most about this was the way he knocked. It was slow and steady, almost as if he were trying to intimidate me somehow. He tried twisting the doorknob, but it didn't budge, as I had thankfully remembered to lock it. In that moment, I had a hard time getting the window open when I suddenly hear a loud bang and see my door is now open. At that point, I pushed the window with all my strength and finally managed to get it open. I took that chance to climb out, and as I did, I caught a glimpse of the man's face before falling to the snow below. Fortunately, I was able to get away to the neighbors with only a sprained ankle, where police were then called. While the neighbors were nice, they let me call the police myself as they didn't want to get involved. A bit strange, I thought, but I could understand why. The police were very patient with me, but even after searching the house, they were unable to find him. What police had concluded was that he had entered the house through our breezeway door and was likely hiding from the cold. My mom came soon after, and we spent the next 3 days at my uncle's house. I'm much older now, and I have moved past it. My parents still live in that same house, but have installed various security systems and even have a dog. I still think about this incident from time to time, but I'm doing alright. Back before my girlfriend Eliza and I started dating, we hung out all the time as good friends. We both obviously didn't have the same feelings for each other back then, but we did enjoy each other's company. This happened around the time where we both started to feel that there was something more to our relationship than friends. It was the winter of 2018, and we both had planned a skiing trip up to Vermont. Vermont had really good slopes, and with us having some experience with skiing, we were up for a challenge. We rented out a hotel room close to the ski resort as it seemed the most convenient for us. We took the gondola ride up to the mountain and had a great time skiing. As much as people don't like the idea of skiing, it was actually really fun if you practiced. That being said, we spent most of the day skiing and having a blast. Apart from the ski resort was a hiking trail and lodge for people who either didn't want to go skiing or if people wanted a break. It was nearing the end of the day, and Eliza suggested we take the hour-long hike around the mountain. Now, this hike was sort of a do-it-at-your-own-risk type of hike, meaning there was no trail guide or anything like that. The only thing we had as a guide was some painted markings around the trees to know where we were going. Even though it was a beginner's hike, it was still really easy to get lost in these woods. Eliza and I started our hike, just enjoying ourselves and whatnot. We're about 20 minutes into the hike when she has the urge to pee. It wouldn't be for another 50 minutes or so before we reached an actual bathroom, so she said she'd go into the woods and that she'd be back. I watch as she walks off the path and into the woods before disappearing behind a large tree. She went pretty far off, but I thought she just needed extra privacy, especially us being on our first trip together. However, as the minutes passed, she never returned to the path and I didn't even see her. I then thought to myself, what could she possibly be doing that's taking her so long? I thought. At this point, she had been gone for a good 10 minutes, and that's when I started to get worried. I step out of the trail and follow her footpath to try and find out where she went. Thank God I see her standing by a small clearing with her phone out. Then she motions for me to go to her. When I walk up to her, I see what she stopped for. In this small clearing was what I could only describe as huge bones. Maybe bear, maybe horse, I don't know. The majority of the bones were organized in circles, and even some formed into a teepee of sorts. There were also some smaller bones hanging from trees by some string. I asked Eliza what the hell this was. As expected, she didn't know, and we began to wonder if the resort knew about this. There was also what appeared to be a half-formed humanoid snowman-type sculpture next to the bones, indicating that someone had recently been here. All of a sudden, we both began to get a strange feeling that we were being watched, and we got out of there ASAP. We were not going to stick around to find out who or what made this, as it didn't strike me as anything good. We told the resort, but we never heard anything back from them after our trip. In the off chance that the bones were fake, it could have very well been someone easily pranking us. However, I'm not sure if I believe that. We're now a couple and plan on getting married soon, but we'll always have this story to share. It was New Year's Eve 2016. My friend Kevin had invited me over to his place to come watch fireworks with his girlfriend. Buying fireworks wouldn't be necessary as his next-door neighbors had put on quite a show every year. They basically did one for the whole neighborhood so that people didn't have to leave their homes or go out and buy fireworks. They would obviously be setting off fireworks right at 12, and Kevin had allowed me to arrive much earlier, giving us time to chill. New Year's Eve was on a Saturday, and neither of us had to work the next day, so that meant I could stay longer. For reference, we were both in our late 20s, so naturally we were more able to stay out late. Kevin had ordered us some pizza for dinner, and even grabbed a few cold ones for the special New Year. I hadn't seen Kevin nor his girlfriend in a while, primarily due to work, so we all wanted to make this night special for the three of us. We all sat down in the living room waiting for the ball drop, which was also when the neighbors would start their fireworks. We still had a good 2 hours before the new year, and that's when Kevin said he was gonna go buy some more beers at the gas station since we didn't have enough. His girlfriend and I stayed at the house while he was out. At one point, I'm in the living room and his girlfriend is out back talking on the phone with someone. I found myself watching TV when I hear what sounded like a door shut from upstairs. This was weird, as Kevin had mentioned it would only be the three of us at his house tonight. I look at his girlfriend, but she didn't appear to hear it as she was still on the phone. The minute she got off the phone, I go up to her and ask if she heard a door close from upstairs. She replied with a no, and that it was likely the wind, as she had apparently left a window open up there earlier. That seemed to have explained it, and I went back to the living room before Kevin had come back with the remaining beers. By this point, we only had about an hour left, and we used that time to play Uno, a game both of them played every New Year's Eve as a sort of tradition. Kevin and his girlfriend were on their fourth beer, so they naturally got drunk, making everything funnier for them. Anyway, we finish the game and go outside getting ready to watch the fireworks. Keep in mind that we were so close to the neighbors that we could practically see them get ready, so we basically had front row seats. Kevin had set up his tripod and camera to film the fireworks, as he did every year. We turned on the TV outside and counted down to the new year, wishing each other great success, new memories, etc. Several fireworks began to shoot up into the sky, lighting up the night with vibrant colors with the loud sound vibrating in us. It was honestly a great experience so far, and I wanted to walk out to the backyard to get a clear shot with my phone. The whole show lasted a good 10 minutes or so, and once it was over, I turned around to face the house, and that's when I saw someone in the upstairs window. Both Kevin and his girlfriend were still on the porch, and I told Kevin to call the police and that someone was in the house. He was still a little tipsy from the alcohol, but when he snapped out of it, he ran upstairs with a kitchen knife. All the while, I was expecting to hear some sort of commotion going on, but it never did. All I heard was a few doors opening and closing and Kevin coming downstairs a few minutes later. He told us that he didn't find anyone up there and wanted to make sure if what I saw was actually a person. I told him I was sure, even by pointing out which room I saw them in, who was probably now gone. I mean, what else would it have been, I thought. Me, Kevin, and his girlfriend searched the entire house looking for the supposed intruder, but ultimately found nothing. Seeing as I had a few drinks myself while also being tired, I accepted the fact that it was all in my head at the end of the night when I went home. They didn't call the cops because, well, there really was no point. Days went by and I went on with life as usual, and I began to sort of forget about the whole thing. That was until a week later, where I received a phone call at 1 a.m. from Kevin. I was nearly half asleep at that point, but he said that he was sorry for not believing me about the person I saw on New Year's. Turns out, Kevin had gotten home from work early and caught a homeless man drinking a milk carton from his fridge. The person I saw in the window that night was him. There's really no point in explaining what directly happened after that, but let's just say Kevin took it into his own hands. The man simply admitted to sneaking into his house a day after Christmas through his garage door. His reason being because of the cold outside and wanted to find warmth. For context, we live in Wisconsin, meaning we have some of the coldest winters in the US. He was arrested and taken in, which according to Kevin didn't seem like the worst idea, as at least he'd have food and a bed. The most disturbing part, however, was that he was caught with 2 pairs of Kevin's girlfriend's underwear in his pocket. I'm guessing this was the reason as to what made Kevin did what he had to, I don't know. Kevin and I are still friends till this day, but had broken up with his girlfriend for reasons I won't go into. However, every year we still look back on this incident and will continue to do so for what may be the rest of our lives.
Last November, I turned off the highway into a 2-pump gas station in the middle of nowhere at around 1:30 in the morning. I guess I was kinda zonked from how tired I was because as I drove my car up to the pump, everything seemed as normal as could be. My eyes were locked on the pump display as I filled my car up, trying my best to not go a penny over $30, so it was only when I walked over to the kiosk to pay that I noticed something was off. The first thing that got my attention was how there was no one manning this kiosk. At first, I just waited, thinking the employee was just taking a quick bathroom break or something of that nature. But then as I started to look around, I realized the driver of the car at the pump in front of me was nowhere to be seen either. They weren't in their car, and they weren't inside the convenience store. So my first thought was how the driver and the gas station attendant must have been both in the back of the store, I guess. I got this momentary chill, thinking I might have interrupted a robbery or something, and I was suddenly very hesitant to knock on the glass or call for service. I remember turning to check out the car parked in front of me and thinking, if it's a Honda, then I'm getting out of here. But it looked to me like it was a 2011 3 Series. Now, if you don't know cars, Hondas are easy to steal. BMWs, on the other hand, not so much. And while that didn't completely preclude the possibility that there was a robbery in progress, it reassured me enough that I started knocking on the glass and asking if there was anyone there. I knocked once, and then twice, and then after the third time, I knocked on the glass in as many minutes, and it hit me that something highly unusual was clearly going on. My first thought was to try the door to the convenience store. I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be locked, but when I pushed, the door swung right open for me. I walked up to the counter, calling out, "Hello?" the whole time. And then thinking there might have been some kind of medical emergency, I jumped the counter and took a look around the back of the store. There was a bathroom and a storage room and a small office, but all three were unlocked and empty. Then and only then did I realize that the entire gas station was completely deserted. I checked around the back just to be sure, but I figured that there'd be no one there. And then once I was 100% sure something seriously weird was going on, I pulled out my phone and got ready to dial 911. I wasn't still 100% sure what to do, so I called out hello again, but much louder. And when that got no response, I called the cops. I could tell that, at first anyway, that the dispatcher thought that I was just some jerk customer who was angry my gas station attendant wasn't there when I needed them. But once I properly explained that there was literally no one to be found anywhere on the premises or elsewhere, she started to take my call a little more seriously. She asked where I was, and when I told her, she asked if it looked like there had been a robbery. I remember asking, how the hell would I know? But she explained that if there had been a robbery recently, an employee might still be hiding somewhere. And I felt this sort of twinge of frustration because, like I said, I'd looked probably everywhere except the dumpster around the side of the gas station. And as I'm walking back from checking out the highway for signs of life, I just so happened to be passing it as the thought to open it popped into my head. I wanted to be able to say to the dispatcher, "There, I even checked the station's dumpster. There's definitely nobody here, ma'am." But when I opened the dumpster, there they were. I only caught a glimpse of what was inside before I dropped the lid of that dumpster and backed off like the thing was radioactive. But a glimpse was enough for me. There were 2 bodies in there, all bent out of shape with dark stains all over their clothes, and one of them was almost certainly wearing a gas station uniform. I remember saying something like, "Oh, Jesus, oh my God," pacing away from the dumpster in a state of total shock, with the dispatcher in my ear. Sir, tell me what's going on, sir." And I told her, "They're in the dumpster. Jesus fucking Christ, they're in the goddamn dumpster." The cops arrived in about 10 to 15 minutes, and by then I'd run off near to the highway to puke up all the contents of my stomach. And I'd remembered that thing about preserving the integrity of crime scenes, so in a wild panic, I'd actually puked as I was running, then had to hold puke in my mouth for a few seconds before I puked even more out near the highway. And after that, I just walked back and forth hitting my vape until I saw a cop car heading towards me down the highway, and then after talking to one of the officers for a few minutes, he told me I was free to leave. I looked the whole thing up online the first chance that I got later, but although I found a bunch of stories about a member of the public, yours truly, finding some bodies at a gas station, there was nothing that explained how or why those 2 people had been killed. And ever since, I've always been extra careful while driving at night, both in the sense that I keep a very close eye on my fuel gauge and try to avoid any nocturnal pit stops, but also, if a gas station looks a little too quiet, I'll avoid it altogether and just head to the next one. I used to work nights at a gas station called North Star Mart out near a place called Foster in rural Virginia. I used to drive up from Gloucester, get there at around 10 p.m., and then work all through the night until 6 a.m. when my boss, a dude named Judd, came over to relieve me. Judd lived right next door to the gas station in a big old house that he claimed that he built himself. There was no way that he built that whole thing on his own, but he was far too nice for me to call him out on it, so I just let it be. He was a great boss, too. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Not many folks can say that they had a boss who had done almost anything to keep them safe, but I can, and it makes me feel a little guilty sometimes that I don't head up there to visit him more. But I don't like driving around Foster anymore. I don't like going anywhere near the place, and by the end of this story, I think you're going to understand why. I worked at the North Star for 9 months and 3 weeks, working anything from 2 to 5 nights a week, depending on how busy I was at school. Not a single customer in all the time I worked there ever gave me a single ounce of trouble. It was one of the best jobs I ever had in that respect. It was always a little busier on weekends, but during weeknights, I'd sometimes serve only 2 or 3 customers a night and spend the rest of my time watching movies on my iPod, back when that was like a revolutionary thing to do. Judd was really chill like that. He didn't give me a bunch of cleaning tasks, and he didn't give me any busy work at all, actually. And he only ever had one rule. If anyone ever showed up late at night, acting weird in any way, I was to call him right away. It didn't matter if the call woke him and his wife up from the sweetest dreams they'd ever had. If anyone was acting sketch, Judd wanted to know about it. I figured that was fair enough. The gas station was Judd's whole life. It was his retirement plan, so if it went up in flames, well, you see where I'm going with this. So even though it felt slightly emasculating, as in I felt like I could take care of the station myself, I agreed to give Judd a call every time there was any disturbances. When he first told me about his little golden rule, I'd be lying if I said that it didn't make me a little nervous, I guess. It suggested that there were a lot of weird people who came by the gas station at night, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. Like I said, 9 whole months and not a single instance of weird or disturbing behavior. And then one night, it happened. I was in the back office one night, splitting my attention between security monitors and a copy of The Dark Knight Rises, when I suddenly saw a lone figure approaching the gas station. We had 3 cameras, one facing the pumps, one facing the approach to the store, and a third which allowed me to watch the inside of the store from the back office. I can see the guy walking towards the store, past the pumps, and then into the view of the second camera, but then instead of walking into the store like literally everybody else, he stops dead outside the door. He's right in the view of the second camera, so I'm looking at this guy fairly close up, and he looked like a perfectly regular rural Virginian dad type. He looked like he had work boots on, some faded jeans, and a baseball cap with some kind of hunting or fishing logo on it. Literally the most unremarkable looking guy that could ever walk through our door. But his behavior most definitely got my attention. I guess it's not entirely true that nothing weird ever happened, because there was one previous occasion where I called Judd in the middle of the night. Some crazy lady was screaming like a demon out near the pumps. It was a Saturday, and it had to be maybe 4 to 4:30 in the morning, but just like Judd said, I gave him a call at his house. I told him about the lady and how her screaming was freaking me out. He asked for a description, I gave him one, and then he tells me, "Oh, that's just Rhonda liquored up on payday. She'll head home once she's tired herself out." And then you know what? She did. She eventually stopped screaming and then just kind of walked off, like she was done with that night's performance. Anyway, the guy in the sporting goods cap stopped dead and just stood there in front of the camera, not moving a muscle. Not nearly as freaky as screaming like a banshee, but still weird nonetheless. I figured he was, I don't know, taking a moment to think or something. But then, as I'm watching him, his head starts slowly moving, turning his neck until he's staring into the camera lens. I know it was just an illusion, but it felt like he was staring directly at me, and that was easily one of the most unnerving sensations I've ever experienced. Once the guy's behavior reached a concerning level of weird, I grabbed the phone and called Judd. I didn't even feel emasculated doing it either. Whatever that guy's problem was, it wasn't meth. It was something way scarier than that. Judd picked up the phone, then once again he asked me to describe the person acting weird. I started describing the guy, and then the next thing, Judd slams the phone down. I look back at the screen and the guy's disappeared from view, but he's not in the store either, so I'm thinking, where the hell's he gone? But at the same time, I'm also thinking, why did Judd just slam that phone down on me? He told me to call him if something weird started to happen, and the first time he sounded sleepy but pretty calm, so I was wondering what was so different about that time, when I suddenly see him on the monitors. Judd was running towards the gas station in nothing but his boxer shorts and a wife beater, and he was carrying a shotgun in his hands. He burst into the store and asked me where he is. Then when I say the guy just disappeared, and that I think he just walked off, Judd runs past me into the office to check the monitors. I'm freaking out too, because what the hell is he carrying that shotgun for? But no matter how many times I asked him what's going on, he kept silencing me and telling me that I needed to concentrate as he ran back to the security footage to get a look at the guy's face. I watched him, rewinding the footage until he finally found what he was looking for, and when he did, I watched Judd turn completely pale. Whoever it was, Judd was terrified of him. So terrified that he felt the need to come running over with a shotgun to protect me, and then that scared the hell out of me too. Judd sent me home that night after calling the cops, and the next day, he called to say that he'd understand if I didn't want to come back to work. I asked just one time if he could tell me who the man was, and Judd paused and then repeated the part about understanding if I didn't want to come back. I thanked him for the job, wished him luck, and then just hung up. Like I said earlier, I still feel guilty about not going up to see him more. He was a great guy and a great boss, but without knowing who that guy was, without knowing why Judd was so scared of him, I couldn't put myself in the position of working for him anymore. I didn't want to die for some stupid gas station job, no matter how cool my boss was. And if there was a guy out there who scared the hell out of one of the toughest sons of bitches I'd ever known, then what chance in hell did I have?
My mom used to work the night shift at a gas station in the early 90s. This is one of those mom and pop gas stations, so typically there was only about one person working the station at a time. During the night of the story, my mom's schedule had overlapped with one of her coworkers for 2 hours because there had apparently been an armed robbery in the same area the night before. So the owner was a bit concerned about being the next target of the robbers. After about 2 hours, my mom's coworker leaves. About a half hour later, there was a goth girl that comes into the station and buys a pack of cigarettes. The girl is fidgety but polite. My mom tells the girl to have a good night, then begins to clean the hot dog case. As my mom starts cleaning, she notices that the girl doesn't leave the station. The girl then starts walking around for about 5 minutes, just looking at random items on the shelves. My mom finally stops what she is doing, and she then asks the girl if she needs anything. The girl goes up to the counter and tells my mom that her car ran out of gas just up the street, so she needs to get some gas. The girl doesn't have a gas can, so my mom grabs one of the gas cans from behind the counter and then tells the girl the price of the can. The girl then says that she doesn't have enough money for the can. Mind you, she literally just bought a pack of cigarettes. My mom kind of wears her heart on her sleeve more than she wants to sometimes, so she tells the girl that she'll buy the gas can for her. The girl then smiles and thanks my mom. My mom lets the girl know that she doesn't have enough money to buy gas for herself, let alone for somebody else. The girl seems to accept this and then thanks my mom profusely. Goth girl says she has someone she can call who will stop by the station and give her some gas money. My mom then asks if she has enough change for the payphone, and the girl says yes. She thanked my mom yet again for the gas can, then leaves. My mom is really good at reading people, and while the goth girl seemed polite, there's something about the whole situation that was really giving my mom bad vibes. My mom looks at the surveillance footage that gives an outside view of the station. Instead of walking to the payphone, which is just left of the front door, the girl starts walking to a van that's parked really close to the station's exit. The girl then walks up to the passenger side of the van, and she starts talking to someone who's inside the van. She points a few times at the station while my mom is secretly praying she's not about to be robbed. The conversation between Goth Girl and whoever was in the van only lasts about a minute or two, and my mom just watches as the Goth Girl starts walking right back to the station. The Goth Girl comes back to the station and she tells my mom that she had got some gas money from her uncle, but that when she tried pumping gas, she had some trouble with the handle of the gas pump. Mind you, the gas pumps at the station are literally your basic no-thrills pumps. The girl then asks my mom if she could come outside and help her. My mom pretends to be calm, but she then starts to panic on the inside. She then tells the girl that she can't leave the station, so she asks the girl to try another pump. The girl says she tried them all, but she just can't figure out how they work. She asks again if my mom would come outside and just show her how one of the station's pumps work. My mom apologizes and she then explains that she's not able to leave the station unattended, or she'll be fired. She tells the girl that there's a gas station just a block up the street and that they always have multiple employees on staff, so she should be able to get someone to help her over there. The girl starts to whine and she starts to let out this really eerie sort of snarl. She then gives the fakest big smile she can muster and tells my mom that she'll only be gone for a minute and that she really needs my mom's help. Now, when she said that she really needed her help, her teeth were clenched and she started stomping up and down like a pouting toddler. Goth Girl then starts breathing excitedly like she's a rabid animal or something. At this point, my mom then drops all pretenses of being nice, gives the girl what she calls her cold bitch smile, and then says, "So, by the way, I saw you talking with your friends outside, and I already called the cops and gave them your friend's license plate number. They should be here in just a minute. They're so fast in this town." My mom was of course bluffing, and luckily for her, the girl seems to believe her. Goth Girl quickly leaves the store, gets inside the van, and right before she can fully shut the side door, the van is then peeling right out of the parking lot. My mom did wind up calling the police later on and then gave a general description of the van and girl. It didn't take too long for the police to find the van. It had apparently been abandoned on the side of the road near a wooded area. The girl and her friends had used hammers and box cutters to destroy the van's interior. The police didn't know what the girl and her friends had planned to do to my mom, but they said whatever it was, it probably wasn't even robbery. My mom wound up turning in her 2-week notice shortly after this happened. My mom's advice to anyone listening to this story is to always trust your gut instincts. They just might save your life one day.
So this was earlier this year. I moved to a different town and was finally settled into my new place. It was the night before Christmas and family was coming by early that morning, so I spent the evening cleaning and prepping for the next day. All was well, I was in high spirits and crawled into bed. It was the first time that I was hosting Christmas, so I was a bit too anxious and giddy to fall asleep. I knew that I should sleep soon, but I was just wide awake, so I played on my phone a bit and just passed the time. It was about maybe 10 p.m. or so. But then suddenly, I'm in the car with my husband on the highway and he's pointing at something in the sky, frantically yelling, "What is that?" And the next thing I know is that I'm groggy and waking up and there's lights around me and a dark shadow, and it feels like there's fingers pressing my temples and something is on my head. I vividly remember that feeling of dread and thinking, oh no, not again. I feel groggy but managed to mumble and lift my arm, which was heavy, and tried to say, "I'm awake." I then just closed my eyes and wanted it to be over with, and I remember thinking, I hope this doesn't last long. Suddenly, there's blackness, and I snap awake. I'm drenched in sweat. There are 2 points on my forehead that are throbbing in pain. I'm in my bedroom again, and everything as I left it. The TV is on, my phone is in my hand, and I'm thinking, man, that was a weird dream. Suddenly there's a loud noise and the power shuts off, leaving me in the dark. It scared me half to death as well, and I jumped up and tried to wake my husband, who was dead asleep. Finally, after a few seconds though, the power was back on, and my husband thinks that I'm just silly. The thing is that I understand that it could very much have been just a dream. That's not impossible, I suppose, but I'm not much of a dreamer, and if I do, they aren't that vivid. This one just felt so real, but why? And why aliens of all things? I'm mostly into ghostly stories, so I don't read or look up UFO stuff that much, and I remember the physical feeling of dread that it was happening again, and I could feel my stomach drop, and I felt sick when I thought, not this again. But the strange thing is that I don't recall any other dreams or experiences like this. It's just so random. It was Christmas too, so I definitely wasn't thinking about aliens or anything. Anyway, I don't know what to think of any of this. I guess I'm just sharing it to get it off my chest and reaching out, I suppose. So, if you have any idea about what any of this could be, then please do let me know.
A while ago, I got a job at a small hospital just out of town. I was excited as it was my first job I had been offered since my graduation. It was just casual work, but I was still ecstatic at the chance to work there, as the money was great, and it was the place I did my training at. Most of the time, I would do 12-hour shifts from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Sometimes I would work the late shift from 3 to 11. I never cared much for those. I was used to working late for my previous jobs, but I had to drive a lot further to get home. There was usually 4 nurses, 1 administrator, me, and the emergency doctor. That's it. Now, being in a small hospital like this one, you see some pretty strange things come in. Some people can't make it into the city, so we've had the emergency helicopter have to drop in every now and again. I've seen some pretty horrific things, like whole families dying from accidents on curved country roads. I've even had people bring in animals in desperation, as there was no veterinarian nearby that was open. This one particular night, around 10 p.m., I was sitting and talking with one of my nurses about a patient's chart, but I was mostly just wasting time until I got off at 11. The hospital was very quiet. I had only checked in 6 patients up to that point. I then heard a strange noise by the entrance. I then saw a man making his way toward us. He looked pretty normal, but he had on a long coat, which was strange as it was the middle of the summer, and even though it was dark, it was still very warm out. The nurse beside me let out a long sigh and got up to use the restroom, leaving me to deal with our new arrival. As he drew closer, the strange sound got louder, and something caught the light. He was dragging something behind him, but I couldn't make out what it was, although I assumed it was metal from the scraping sound it was making. It sent a shiver up my spine. He stopped at the desk, and I could see his eyes were wide, his pupils big, his face was pale, and it looked like he hadn't slept in a while. I had seen this look many times before, and immediately associated it with someone who was under the influence of something. He leaned on the desk and ran his fingers through his hair, pulling at it and grinding his teeth. When people like this come in, they are usually looking for drugs. Most of the time they will complain about migraines or fibromyalgia, anything we can't prove to the contrary. I processed him as usual and noticed he was becoming more and more irritable as time passed. Eventually, when I finished up, I pointed him toward the waiting area. He then asked how long it was going to be. Knowing that the on-call doctor had gone on a quick break, I estimated about half an hour. That's when his whole demeanor changed. The anger on his face was obvious as he stormed over to the waiting area, which is a room between the ER and the front desk. As he walked away, I caught a glimpse of what he was dragging behind him, and quickly came to the realization it was an axe. I panicked and almost called the code over the PA system, but I didn't want him to realize. I promptly called the police on my cell phone and ran down the hall to signal to the nurses we had an issue. The police would have to come from 2 towns over, which takes on average 20 minutes. Of course, as we were all pretty small girls, we didn't want to go near him. This man was tall and muscular. Even all of our forces combined, we wouldn't stand a chance. I calmly walked back to the front desk and paged the doctor, asking him to call me. I waited and waited, but I never got a response. I watched the man getting more agitated, and soon he began yelling and asking for help. I quickly hid from him. The other nurses and I devised a plan to lock him in the waiting area. The glass is reinforced and the doors are heavy, so it should have been able to hold him there until the police arrived. The plan went down without a hitch until the man realized what we had done. He started screaming and throwing chairs around the room. He then began using his axe on the door. We were all standing near the front desk and watching. I have never been so terrified in my life, and what made it even worse was the fact that he was making some headway on the door. It was around this time that the emergency doctor comes back from his break. He strolled through the front entrance, still sipping on a drink. When he saw all of us huddled by the front desk, he immediately took charge of the situation. After getting all the necessary information, he disappeared toward the back entrance, where the EMTs usually enter from. He then unlocked one of the waiting room doors, and then tackled the man when he wasn't looking. He bound the man's wrists together with cable ties and sat on his back until the police arrived. I was so grateful for having a young, physically fit doctor with us on that night. I bought him coffee every time our schedules crossed as a thank you, but I don't think that'll ever be enough. As this was the second incident I experienced while working the 3 to 11, I decided to never work late shifts again. I'm now on a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 schedule, and I feel much safer now. Last August, I was hospitalized in the voluntary psychiatric ward at the local hospital due to some major anxiety and depression issues I was having. It was unfortunately my second hospitalization, and this time I would have to have a roommate. No one knows why, but for some reason when the psychiatric unit was built, they decided to put in double rooms. Because of this, they would often have high-functioning patients share rooms. Since I was here about a month ago, when I showed up, the nurses all remembered me. Stays in the psychiatric unit average about 1 to 2 weeks. Because it's the voluntary unit, there's no actively psychotic or violent people here, usually. My roommate, Jane, seemed nice enough. She was an unassuming, petite woman. One thing she really enjoyed doing was sitting at her desk and work on crossword puzzles. In fact, that was the only thing she ever seemed to be doing. In the rooms, each patient gets a desk and a dresser, which are right next to each other. I was admitted to the hospital around 6 p.m. By 9:30, I had taken my medication and was doing some meditation before going to sleep. I was looking at this beautiful picture of a tree and fence that was mounted to the wall and focusing on it while slowing my breathing. That's when I saw that there was writing on it. I hadn't noticed it earlier. It was in pencil, and was put into the picture with enough force to indent it. The writing said, "They are all liars. Liars." There were some other things I couldn't quite decipher. It creeped me out a bit, but I figure it had to have been the previous patient, so I went to the nurse's station to let them know. If you've ever been to a psychiatric ward, you'll know that most of the time, it's terribly boring. I spent most days walking around the unit. Some patients would actually count their laps. Apparently 30 laps equaled a mile. I also spent some time in the art room painting with a group. I began to notice that Jane never went to any of the groups. In fact, she never left the room. Then I realized that I had never seen her leaving the desk. Each time I came into our room, she would be sitting there, working on a crossword. I figured that's how she dealt with the boredom of this place. I tried to make small talk with her when I came in and out. I then realized something odd. The crossword puzzle she was working on never changed. It was the same exact one, with no progress being made. I would compare it to that scene from The Shining, where Mrs. Torrance discovers that all Jack had been writing for his screenplay was, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." It's quite a chilling way to discover that someone has gone off the deep end. The second night I came back in around 10:30 to go to sleep. She was still sitting at the desk, working on that same crossword puzzle with the lights on. I shrugged at it, because by this point she was no longer responding to me saying hello or asking if she was going to join the group. It was possible that she could have been having a reaction to some medication or just didn't feel like talking. So I turned off all my lights and pulled my privacy curtain closed. The medication I was on at the time basically knocked me out, so I was able to fall asleep pretty quickly. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to one of the medical assistants asking my roommate if she thought it was time to go to bed or turn off her light so that her roommate, referring to me, could sleep. She didn't really respond to the person and didn't turn off the light. I ended up just rolling back over and going to sleep. At some point she had turned off the light and gone to bed, because I woke up sometime later in complete darkness. I was confused. The medications I was taking would usually make me sleep for 12 hours straight. I then realized I could hear someone talking. It was Jane. She kept repeating, "Jesse, help me. Jesse, help me." I responded with, "Jane, are you okay?" She didn't reply to me, but she kept saying it over and over again, so I thought she may have been talking in her sleep. Eventually I dozed off again, only to wake up again at some point later. She was saying the same thing, only louder this time. I knew that she wasn't talking in her sleep this time. I tried to get her to respond to me, but she never acknowledged that I was even there. She just kept raising her voice. "Jesse, help me. I need help, Jesse." I got up and went to go get the night nurse, whose name was Jessie. I told her that my roommate was calling for her. By the time we got back into the room, Jane was hysterical. She was crying out for Jessie and trying to get out of bed. Jessie did her best to calm her down, and I was rattled. But I was given another sedation, and I ended up going back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, Jane wasn't in the room, and a table that had once been near her bed was now in front of the bathroom curtain. There were no doors because of self-harm risks. I went to use the bathroom, and there was an entire roll of toilet paper in the toilet bowl. Again, I went to go get a nurse, because I didn't want to be the one responsible for flooding the bathroom. I had already flooded a private bathroom by accident during my first stay. When I went out onto the floor, I realized two things. First, there was a medical assistant standing by the door near the front desk. Second, Jane was also standing at the door. The door only opens when someone phones in, so I was confused as to why there had to be someone essentially guarding the door. I found out from another patient who had insomnia that my roommate had spent the night running around the ward and throwing furniture around. They had finally gotten security down to talk to her, and she calmed down, but then stood in front of the door and was still standing there like a statue. 4 hours. I went about my usual routine of eating breakfast and painting. I asked some of the assistants about my roommate, and they tell me that she's been standing there since their shift started, 6 a.m. It's now 10:30 a.m. That made me a bit uneasy, but I just kept painting. I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I look up and I see Jane outside of the room, staring in at me. She sees me look up and quickly looks away, but she doesn't move for a good 20 minutes. I get weirded out and decide to go back to my room for the first time that morning. She follows me into the room. I acted like I was just picking something up and leave again, and go to the assistant sitting at the front desk. I tell her politely that I might sound a bit paranoid, but that I think my roommate is following me around. So she lets me sit with her at the front desk. Because I'm sitting there with nothing to do, I decide to call my insurance company with a question. As I'm on the phone, Jane comes walking up with 2 plastic bins full of stuff. When they first let you into the unit, they give you a plastic bin full of various supplies. The bins were full of her stuff and my stuff. She also had the pillowcase off my bed that was full of my clothing. I lost it. Why does she have my stuff? That's my iPad. I kinda start freaking out. I do have anxiety issues myself. There were 3 nurses standing by, and they were flabbergasted. They had never seen anything like this. I'm now on the floor crying my eyes out, and someone kneels down and put their arm around me. It's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. I had my eyes closed and I assumed it was a nurse, but in a bizarre twist, it was actually Jane. I tell her to stop touching me, and then tell the nurses I want her away from me. The nurses ended up bringing me into a private meeting room to go through my stuff. They then tell me that Jane is going to be transferred to the involuntary ward at some point during the day. Unfortunately, due to Jane's behavior, I can't return to my room until the transfer is complete. While this was all going on, Jane has now moved to the back door, which opens up into a stairwell that goes down to the garden outside. There's no way for her to open it, obviously, and she just stands there for hours. After a while, I just start ignoring her, though she stares at me whenever I'm in her line of vision. It was around 6 or 7 p.m. My husband had come to visit me, and we were playing cards with another patient who had just moved into our unit. We were sitting in the cafeteria, which was right next to where Jane was waiting, separated by a wall of windows. I believe that she had stood there on purpose so that she could keep an eye on me. As we were playing rummy, we see the psychiatrist come up with 2 security guards. She starts explaining to Jane that she has to go upstairs now. Jane gets agitated and refuses to move. A security guard goes to take her arm, and then she goes berserk, turning to one of the windows and starts banging on it, looking straight at me and screaming for me to come and help. They literally drag her kicking and screaming upstairs. I was a bit shaken up, but at least she was gone now. I end up with another roommate, also named Jane, but this new Jane was super sweet, and she was in the unit because she was detoxing from a medication. My attending psychiatrist assured me that my reaction was completely normal, and so I start to feel a lot better. The next day after lunch, it was time to visit the garden. I actually really enjoyed going outside. It's refreshing after spending so many hours cooped up in the ward. At the time, we were only allowed 30 minutes. I became anxious when I saw that Jane, my former roommate, was one of the people in the garden from the upstairs unit. So I asked one of the supervisors if I can sit near them during garden time. They say that's fine, and everything goes okay. Jane doesn't approach me at all. Now you might think that I'm being a bit dramatic, but Jane is one of those people who only appears to not be paying attention. However, it only appears that way. When we came back inside, since I didn't need an escort back to my unit, I made sure to break off from the group and get away from Jane as soon as possible. But then, Jane makes a beeline, right for me, and she had to be restrained again. I didn't see her again after that. I think maybe the hospital staff realized that having her around me in any capacity was a bad idea. Something about me triggered her, and I don't like to think about what would have happened to me if she continued to be my roommate. This is a story that was told to me by my mother when I was old enough to understand what had almost happened to me. I was only a few weeks old at the time. In those days, when a mother had given birth and had taken their newborns home, midwives were sent from the hospital to check in on the baby and the mother once or twice a week. My dad was working, so he wasn't home, and my mother had put me to sleep and was going about her business in the house. 2 midwives had stopped by earlier that week, so she was confused when she heard a knock at the door. We lived in a very close-knit community where there was rarely any crime, but most people who lived there worked for most of the day, so it was basically deserted around this time. My mother was greeted by a male and a female who were both dressed in hospital uniforms with security badges. They politely asked if they could come in. They explained that they had been sent by the hospital. My mom let them in because they looked like professionals with the badges and uniforms. They even knew that she had a little girl and my mother's name. It was very convincing at the time, but that information was easy to access. The man said that he was going to take me upstairs to check on me, and the woman would look at my mom downstairs. However, my mother didn't feel okay about them wanting to separate us, and she explained that a pair of midwives had already been there that week and said that she was going to call the hospital as nobody had notified her that someone was coming just a day after. She also warned them that her husband, my father, was on his way home from work and wouldn't be happy about this unscheduled visit. At this point, the two got very defensive and said that they would leave after being really pushy with my mother to separate the two of us. After the back and forth, she finally got them to leave. They quickly changed their behavior to a more calm demeanor and said not to worry and that it must have been a mistake. What was even stranger, though, was that when my mom opened the door for them to leave, there was another person waiting in a car outside who still had the engine running. She called the hospital, and they told her they didn't have any midwives scheduled to visit her that day, and that they would always alert the mother if they were going to send one. They also mentioned that they would never ask to separate the mother and the baby. My mother gave them a description of the visitors, and they told her they didn't have any male midwives at that hospital, and that she should contact the police right away. Terrified, my mother called my dad, who came straight home from work, and they reported the incident to the police, but it never amounted to anything that we know of. Who knows what those two were planning to do? If they had gained access to all that information about my mother, they must have had someone watching the house and knew that my father wouldn't be home. And they had even gone through the effort of obtaining the uniforms and badges. Thank God my mom acted on her instincts and got them the hell out of the house. It's even more creepy to imagine what my life would be like now if they had gotten to carry out what they were planning to do that day. I don't believe this could have been a genuine mix-up. They had not followed the standard protocol, and no one told my mother they were visiting. And they were very rude and defensive when my mother challenged them, which is not acceptable behavior from a health professional. I believe we were very lucky they decided to leave. My mother couldn't have done anything if they decided to use force. I just hope They didn't do this to anyone else.
In autumn of 1995, when I was 5 years old, my parents moved us from suburban Dublin to a small town in a neighbouring county. Nowadays, that area would almost be considered suburban, but back then, it was the middle of nowhere, right before Ireland's economy started to really boom too. They bought a house that was about 2 kilometres from the village in a field surrounded on all sides by farmland, with a little cowshed directly touching the edge of our land. It had a long driveway up to the house, 3-bedroom 1900s dormer bungalow, and as a suburban kid, I hated the place as soon as we moved there. My parents were into their late 20s, early 30s at that time. They both had grown up in the city and wanted to experience country life, so it was an opportunity to do a renovation. And when we moved into the place, it was rancid. Nobody had lived in this house for decades, and I remember the water running yellow from the taps and the kitchen being non-existent when we moved in, and the heating wasn't installed yet. On our first Saturday there, I remember we watched what I think was Goldeneye. Could have been a trailer for it that I remember. I was only like 5, so it's a little bit fuzzy. We watched it though beside an electric heater with duvets around a tiny TV. What I'm trying to say is that it was bleak at first. As it moved into winter though, my parents were renovating room by room, and I experienced my first memorable snowstorm. Our electricity went out at one point, and I do remember my mum trying to keep me chill while she lit candles and stuff. And over time, things did eventually get better, and they renovated the upstairs room first. When you walked up the stairs, there was one big room that we all put our beds into that connected to an attic space, which I remember helping my dad put rat traps in and that sticky bug tape onto. Anyway, over time they renovated all the rooms in the house, and it turned out really nice in the end. It was very 90s, with loads of bright colours and a country kitchen and all that. But my mother was really depressed there, and this was a time before the internet took off, and in Ireland at that time, once you left the cities, you only had like 3 channels, and they were all Irish, which in 1995 was not a good thing. She just felt isolated, I guess, and I remember a few times she let me take the day off school and stay home even. I think that she did this because she was lonely though. Anyway, in August of 1996, they gave up and moved us back to the city. They bought a really nice brand new home right before house prices skyrocketed, and I even got to rejoin the class that I had spent a couple of months with in 1995. In 2011, when I was 21, my dad and I went for a drive together and decided to drive back to that town. And he started telling me stories about that house, and suddenly a bunch of experience that I'd had suddenly made a lot of sense. So, remember that big room upstairs? My whole life, I've had this sort of reoccurring dream where I'm lying in bed, my parents are downstairs with my family over, and as I close my eyes, I can see shadows moving in front of me between the hanging lights and the bed, as if someone is sort of walking back and forth in front of me. And I've had that dream maybe 20 times, I would guess. My dad told me that one of the major reasons they left was because they felt the place was actually haunted, apparently. This was obviously news to me, but my mum was already depressed being alone there while he commuted into the city every day. But that she also had experiences that made it very difficult for her to be alone by herself. But both of them had also experienced the shadows and the lights, apparently, and he told me that once she was brushing her teeth in the downstairs bathroom, it sort of felt a cold sensation, and then the back of her robe was pulled so hard that she dropped her toothbrush. But the bit that really freaked her out, apparently, was me talking to myself. My sister had been freaked out by this too. One night, and I remember this clear as day as well, my parents had friends over and I was playing in my bedroom, now downstairs, and I had an 80s arcade machine in my room that my dad had gotten somewhere. You didn't need to put change into it to make it work, but I remember very clearly that I was with a girl who wanted to know how it worked and stuff. And something happened, and she convinced me to get some change and try to force it in. I went to my mum and lied and told her that I needed £1 for the charity box school that they had given me. She gave it to me, and me and the girl tried to slot it in. My mum came in at one point and she was really mad at me because obviously I'd lied to her. I told her that the girl told me to, and my memory gets a bit foggy after that, but my dad in the car that night told me that there never was any girl apparently, and that wasn't the first time that I'd seen her. The other time I was playing in the front garden at the gate and my dad noticed me talking to myself. He came over and told him. He came over and apparently I told him I'm just talking to the girl. And I do remember him being like, okay, that's nice, and not making a sort of big deal about it again, that there was no girl. One time when they weren't looking and I was with her, she actually touched me for the first time. And this is the only time that I remember that I really thought as a kid that something was strange. She sort of touched my hand and then just immediately disappeared. I mean, I was 5 and I didn't know what had happened, but one minute she was there and the next she was gone, and I had this incredible need to take off the t-shirt that I was wearing. It felt like that feeling when you know that there's a spider on you or something. I ran up to the house though and into my room and pulled my clothes off, stomping on them. My mum noticed this too, but I really don't remember anything after that. Anyway, the old house, the smells of rotten eggs and the birds constantly flying into the windows were creepy enough without all of that too, but it apparently really sunk in with my dad when he was at the mechanics in town one day, making small talk, and one of the lads said, "You're brave living in that place," because apparently it had been abandoned for years and had been known locally as a very creepy spot that people would stop and look into on the country walks and stuff, wondering about it. When we eventually got back to it on our drive, the place was once again abandoned and being used solely for storage by whoever bought it, I think. It still looks creepy to today, and the travelers or gypsies who bought it have put a big religious shrine in front of the house. But there were also big sort of beech trees surrounding it, and it had a proper gate and all that, but 25 years haven't been kind to it, that's for sure.
When my boyfriend and I were both still in college, we rented out an Airbnb in Las Vegas during the summer. It was a modest 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house right by the Vegas Strip, making everything in walking distance. This one summer, just wanting to get away from life and away from it all, we booked the Airbnb wanting to have a nice time. The owner was nice, but was very strict on having people over. We assured him we didn't know anyone in Vegas and would honor his wishes. Our third night there, we had just gotten back from the casino after gambling some of our spending money. We've never been to Vegas, so it was okay to gamble at least once. A few hours after we got back to the Airbnb, I was feeling a little ill, so we decided to sleep in separate bedrooms to avoid the spread. However, the bed frame in the other bedroom was broken, so we agreed that I would sleep on the bed while my boyfriend slept on the floor with a simple blanket. I felt bad in the moment, but he didn't mind it though, and we fell asleep shortly after. A few hours go by when I was suddenly awoke to my boyfriend nudging me. He was standing over the bed, trying to wake me up. I take a look at my phone and ask him in an annoyed tone what was so important at 4 a.m. There was a short pause before he said he was hungry and that we should go down to the gas station for a snack. I told him that if he was hungry that he could go himself and to let me sleep. This doesn't satisfy him though. He didn't want to go alone and insisted I go with him. This was weird as I had never seen him act like this before. There was something about his tone that was just off-putting. At least, that was my logic. After several attempts of getting me to come with him, I finally obliged and put on my sandals. We walk outside of the house and start heading towards the street when my boyfriend says, "Babe, I'm not actually hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's someone sleeping there." My heart sank as he said this, and I repeatedly asked him questions to make sure he wasn't playing some sick joke. By some stupid luck, the person didn't see my boyfriend as they were facing the other way. We called the police, and lo and behold, they came out of the Airbnb with a homeless-looking man in handcuffs. However, he didn't try to get away and sort of just let the police arrest him. Looking back, it seemed as if he were wasted or on drugs. We still aren't sure how the man managed to sneak in the house, as the owner claims he had security cameras and would have definitely seen him. This makes us believe that this man had been inside the house for quite some time, even before us. And that's a very scary thing to think. It was the summer of 2016, and my friends and I were taking a road trip down to Miami for Ultra. Ultra is a widely popular music festival around the world that was hosted once a year with many popular celebrities. If you're a big music fan, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, my friends that I had gone with decided to get an Airbnb to stay in, as that would be the cheaper option than a hotel and was well within our budget. I've heard a lot of bizarre and creepy experiences when renting Airbnbs, but at the time we really didn't think much of it. We'd be at the event for the weekend, which meant that we'd also be renting the Airbnb for the whole time. It wasn't a huge house or anything, just the appropriate size for a group of friends. This had been a weekend we've all been looking forward to for about a year now, so we made the most of it. Fast forward to the day of the festival. We're all partying, having a good time, when I take notice of a man staring intently at my friend. This was common, as it's a large event with many people, so it was no surprise there were creeps. However, my friend didn't feel threatened or uncomfortable. She's had several encounters of people looking at her like this, and she sort of just let it go, as it was normal to her. We all sort of dismiss it as some harmless druggie and continue on with our night. The venue was huge with a lot of people, I'd say about 5,000, and after a night of drinking and dancing, we all had went home. It's around 1 a.m. and we're all starting to go to bed so we could get up early the next day. However, I have always had trouble sleeping throughout my life. I've always had an innate fear of the night, ever since I was a child, and for whatever reason, I guess it stuck with me through adulthood. I wasn't so much afraid of what lied in the dark, but rather the dark itself. I always saw it as some silly fear, but this night definitely confirmed my fears. At this point, it's about 2 a.m. and everyone was asleep but me. After constantly rolling around in bed, I finally got some shut-eye, when I awoke to my friend shaking me. In my groggy state, I ask her what she wanted when she says,
"Do you not hear that? Someone's walking around outside."
Now, my bed is right beside the back door, and after rubbing my eyes, I finally heard it. Someone was definitely out there, and it sure as hell wasn't any of us. At first, I would have assumed it was the owner of the home just checking on things. However, why would he be doing that in the middle of the night without us knowing? I get up from my bed and peek outside the window only to see no one there. I knew my mind definitely wasn't playing tricks on me, as I know what I heard. As I get out of bed to go see who it was, I then hear the scream of one of my other friends from another room. Upon rushing into her room, I opened the door and was greeted to a man who I could only recognize as the same man from the concert. The minute he saw me, he basically jumped outside the already open window and ran off into the night. Our two male friends had gone after him, but had given up after they couldn't find him. Police were involved, but there was nothing much they could do other than conducting a police report. We had contacted the actual owner of the house, who was thankfully very understanding and refunded our stay. Since we don't live in Miami, we had to end our trip short and head back home, which was an 8-hour drive. This was many years ago, and my friend has since gotten therapy because of this. She's obviously moved on from it now, but she still talks about it with people till this day. I still mourn over the fact that my friend could have been killed that night if she hadn't woken up. I still have no idea as to how that man from the show managed to find us. My only guess was that he simply followed us but kept his distance while doing so. I've always wondered about what he might have done had I not gone into the room in time. We've never been back to Miami since, and we also don't rent Airbnbs anymore. This world is full of dangerous and evil people who actually want to cause harm to others. If you ever plan on renting Airbnbs, please do so carefully. Make sure all of the doors and windows are locked at night. You never know who might be lurking.
My brothers, my partner, my best friend and I all recently took a trip to Kansas City to go to the Orville Peck concert. We waited until the sort of last minute to reserve an Airbnb because we weren't all 100% sure who was all going. Nonetheless, we found one just outside of Kansas City in a suburb called Grandview at a pretty reasonable rate. The host's overall rating was good, and we didn't see anything out of the ordinary when reading the first few reviews, so we thought we had gotten a fairly good deal. We arrived in Grandview a little after 3 p.m., and our Airbnb was the bottom floor of the owner's home. As we pulled up to the house, we noticed quite a bit of religious signs and statues on the lawn. Now don't get me wrong, I don't have an issue with people believing in whatever they believe in, so long as it doesn't infringe upon other people's rights. But here we are, a group of very visibly queer folks about to attend a gay country concert, blindly walking into someone's home that we'd be staying in for the next 2 nights. We decided there was nothing to be worried about. And after all, we technically were in the Bible Belt, so we shouldn't be surprised that we're staying in the home of someone who is religious. My brother and partner called the host and met her at the door of our guest suite. She showed them around while the rest of us got our suitcases unloaded. When they came back to meet us, they said that she was super nice. And again, our minds were eased. We decided to hang out, order food, and rest a little before we headed off for the concert that night. Our comfort did not last long though. While we were getting our suitcases unpacked, laying around in one of the bedrooms of our guest suite, my youngest brother was casually looking through the drawers of the dressers and side tables, as anyone would do. Most of what he found was normal. Extra bed sheets, pens, paper tablets, nothing really out of the ordinary. That is, until he came across something that would completely change our outlook on the trip itself. Inside the drawer was a Bible, not super weird considering where we were staying, but he was flipping through the pages of it. A small tinfoil packet fell out. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about drugs or what they look like, what fell out of that Bible rhymes with Smack Star Sarowin. That's right, not even 30 minutes into our stay, my youngest brother found hard drugs in the folds of a Bible. At this point, we weren't really sure what to do. We did not want to tell the hosts, and we most certainly did not want to call the cops. We contemplated about taking the packet and throwing it away at some random gas station. But ultimately, we decided to put it back where we found it and act like none of us had seen it. We got our food and started to get ready for the concert. While the rest of us got ready, my partner, who was not going to the concert, started reading through the household handbook. Everything seemed pretty standard except a few lines that read something like, "We will respect your privacy so long as you respect ours. We can be available as you need us to be. And if you're interested in speaking about the ministries of God, feel free to reach out." Again, I have nothing against people following the religions that they do, but that seemed like an awfully out of place thing to put in your house rules handbook for your guest suite. There were a few more books lying around that stuck out a little off base with titles like Teaching Men to Comprehend How Women Think and How Women Should Think. We ignored these things for the most part, aside from my partner who is now freaked out about being left alone at the suite while the rest of us went off to the concert. I told him it was just some Bible thumping and that he really didn't have anything to worry about. He's a worrywart though. So as soon as we left, he locked himself in the bedroom and started looking a little more into the books that we had found. He came to the realization that the books were associated with the group called International House of Prayer, a prominent religious cult founded in Kansas City a majority of whose members live in the Grandview suburb, where we were staying. I could write a whole separate post about the beliefs of those members, but essentially, they are an evangelical Christian group that has a functioning 24/7 prayer room that has been going non-stop since 1999. It's all too much to go over here. We got back from the concert really late, and not to mention a couple of us were still heavily intoxicated from drinking. So he didn't mention much about it that night, but he was very quick to tell us about it the next morning. At this point, we thought, okay, these people are part of some weird church, whatever, it's fine. That explains some of the weird rules and books we had found. We left for the day to go hang out around the city. And when we got back to rest, my friend and partner started doing some more reading on the group. That is when they found out that we were actually staying in one of the prominent leaders' houses. We figured this out by cross-referencing the names of our hosts with the names of important members on the International House of Prayer University website. After this, we started to snoop a little more in our suite. We found large barrels of dried food, a jug of some liquid that we later found out is what they drink while they fast, and lots more teaching materials. Basically, it seemed like they were completely prepared for some sort of end times rapture. Eventually, we did go back and read more thoroughly through some of the reviews, and found a few that would have set off some red flags. For example, one of the reviews stated how the male owner brought out a gun in front of the people who were staying there. Yikes. Not to mention, if there was even a hint of a negative review left, the host would leave a snarky reply. Needless to say, we spent as much of our time as possible away from that Airbnb as we could for the remainder of our trip. And although we were never in any direct danger, we did feel very uncomfortable throughout the entire thing. I've gotten a lot of questions about the heroin. First off, I know that it doesn't come back up in our story, but ultimately, it was the catalyst to all the other weird stuff that we slowly uncovered. And I knew it was heroin because I've seen it before. I have family and friends that have used it, and it is also one of the first things to come up if you Google drugs in foil packet. I do not know if it was left there by a previous guest or if it was the owners. Either way, finding it in a Bible within our first hour of being there was off-putting to say the very least. After reading a few posts on here, I've decided to add one of the creepier, still unexplained events that happened to me and a group of friends within the past 5 years. Thinking back on it, I still get this unnerved bad feeling that sort of lingers. Anyway, here goes. A group of friends and myself rented out a place on the week just for a fun-filled drunken weekend. We were all in our young to mid-20s, and it was supposed to be just for a big party. For the most part, that's exactly what it was. The Friday night and Saturday morning, we pretty much went all out, having a blast on the water, just doing fun, stupid stuff. Well, naturally, when Saturday afternoon rolled around, we were all so dead from going all out, we decided it would just be a night of no drinking, maybe a little weed smoking, and just have a chill evening and night. And that's exactly what it was, very relaxed. So 9 p.m. rolls around, and about 8 of us were inside the house and 5 outside the house. It was a 2-story house with a 2nd-story deck / back porch, and it was surrounded by the woods, and then down through the woods, you would hit the lake. I'll mention that we had already experienced some weird vibes from the locals when we first arrived, mostly just backcountry old-timers that I assumed were leering and irritated because we were a bunch of college-age kids looking to have a good time. But the town and the lake were so large, it's not like anyone knew where we were staying. Anyways, 3 of my friends were upstairs on the back porch, and my other friend and I were downstairs outside, just talking a little on this old table near the woods. I mean, it was otherwise just a really nice night. My friend and I were just getting lost in conversation, and all of a sudden, there was this weird feeling that encompassed us. Like an unnerving physical experience that came from the woods down behind us. It was so strong we both kind of just quieted down, and then out of nowhere, this loud chanting abruptly came from the woods. I have no idea how far away it was because of the way the lake is set up. I'm pretty sure the voices carried up through the forest though. It sounded like a cult chanting away, and all the voices were male. I mean, they were loud and perfectly in sync. I think we were frozen for all about 20 seconds before I couldn't contain myself anymore and darted towards the house with her following behind. It's hard to describe, and I don't know how to explain the feeling that came with that chanting, but it was definitely evil. Like something just so powerfully uninviting. I was shaking by the time we got up to the second story and ran out onto the balcony with our other 3 friends, one of them being my brother. By the time we got up there, the chanting was gone, and I naturally asked, "Did you guys hear that?" in the most shaky, freaked out voice. They all had heard it too, and not just seconds later, the chanting began again. So the 5 of us are out there peering into the forest, listening to the chanting that would sometimes sound far away and then sound relatively close. All male voices in the weirdest language, or I don't even know what it was. Sounded like some strange extreme church. Then following the chanting, a loud bang, like someone hit a huge metal object sounded. And then the worst part came. A man wailing, like in extreme pain wailing. All of my hair was up. It was the freakiest experience ever. My brother and I were staring at one another in a mixture of scared, excitement, and horror. The wailing stopped, and then it was back to the chanting, which eventually died out. I was so freaked out by it that I wanted to call the cops, because whoever was screaming had definitely been in a lot of pain. And that mixed with the weird chanting just made me immediately think of some terrible sacrifice going on. One friend tried to say it had to be some drunk guys just messing around, singing, and being weird. But no way was that coming from some drunk guys. They were perfectly in sync. Then the bang, then the wail of pain. And then, all that weird tension and energy was just gone. Nope. I didn't call the cops, and I wish I would have. But honestly, the forest was so large, and since the lake house was up looking down at the woods in the lake, it could have been anywhere. It definitely wasn't in our close proximity, but close enough to hear all of it that perfectly. We all went inside and got some of the others, but by the time they came out, the chanting had stopped. Someone wanted to go out and explore and find where the sound had been coming from, but obviously that was a stupid idea. After that, I was so ready to go home. I can't explain the relief of driving away from there the next morning. Even now, it gives me the worst feeling ever. Whatever that was, it felt so wrong and so evil. I will never forget it. I can only imagine that it was some kind of weird cult stuff. A story on here reminded me of the time some friends and I had stayed in what turned out to be the 3rd most shadiest hotel in Las Vegas, which for Las Vegas is definitely saying something. I also managed to inadvertently traumatize the entirety of my company, as I recounted what I considered to be just an amusing childhood story. The hotel itself was a bit of a nightmare, as everything was bolted down and none of the doors locked, but I digress. The story itself is about my family's run-in with Satanists on a trip to upstate New York. Though, the growing expressions of disbelief and horror on my companions' faces assured me that the story was not, as I had previously considered, funny per se. In any case, what follows is completely true, and everyone present swears by this narrative. When I was 5 years of age, we took a road trip to upstate New York to see my grandmother on my father's side, as well as to tour around the countryside a little bit. There we were, in rural upstate, away from the region in which my grandmother actually lives, and we were planning on staying in a bed and breakfast my father had booked ahead of time. It had been an unexpectedly long drive due to weather complications, and when we found the B&B in question, we were all quite tired. We went up to the door to check in, and a woman missing her 2 front teeth on both jaws answered. She invited us in, but warned us that they didn't have a room for the night. They were booked solid. My father protested that he had made arrangements in advance, but she said she knew another hotel that had vacancy just up the way, and she would give them a call. And she assured him that they would offer the same rates. But first, she insisted on showing my parents around, as her husband was an artist and she wanted to show them his studio and his quote-unquote famous artwork. We were all invited in, but but after seeing the first few pieces of naked women missing their front teeth, bound, or being tortured in various ways, my parents opted to leave the kids outside with Grandma. Apparently, most of the rooms were full to the ceiling with similarly foreboding images of dead or dying people, with the occasional sculpture of menacing animals. My parents were a bit creeped out, but just figured these people were a little eccentric, and they had dodged a bullet by ending up somewhere else. We all waited out back while the woman called her friend, beside a pit containing what could have been nothing other than an altar covered with pentagrams. My mother mentioned that it seemed strange that not only had they not met the husband, who was supposedly there somewhere, having toured the entire house, but there hadn't been a single sign of life or piece of luggage suggesting that anyone else was actually staying in any of these guest rooms in this supposedly fully booked B&B. A side note that's probably not worth mentioning, but I've found strange when my mother brought it up while telling me the story later, was that we stopped by a park to stretch our legs at some point before proceeding to the next place. The storm was closing in on us, and my parents wanted to be sure we had zero energy upon arrival. While in this park, my mother claimed that one of us found and brought to her a small necklace with a pendant on it. The pendant itself was a pentagram on one side with a Third Reich symbol on the other. My mother took it away and put it inside her purse. We arrived at the next bed and breakfast to be greeted by a different woman, also suspiciously missing her 2 front teeth, upper and lower. It was about this time that my grandmother mentioned that she had read a lot of articles recently about tourists being killed by some cult of Satanists or some such in this area. Great. She tended to tell a lot of tall tales, so I think my parents kind of rolled their eyes and dismissed it. But they made a point to mention it later. The storm was now upon us, and we were all exhausted. And there was nowhere else to stay that we could find anywhere near there. My dad decided we would make do with whatever they had to offer. What they had to offer was a slightly renovated barn. During the bustle of moving our luggage in, the woman kept inviting my brother and I into the house, saying she had some sweets, and wouldn't we like to meet her kitties? She made it clear, however, that my parents were not welcome into the house because it was too messy, and she would be embarrassed. We were then herded away into the barn and told not to talk to the lady. Once inside, my father, who was by this time a bit creeped out, went about checking the beds and securing the one-room barn unit. The windows had no coverings whatsoever, and the doors had no locks. We placed pillows from the couches in the window frames, and my dad grabbed a dresser against one wall to block the door. When he went to move the dresser, he discovered it was on wheels, which were completely silent. He also noticed that the wall behind it moved a little when he shifted the dresser. When he scrutinized the wall, he found a seam. He pushed on the wall and it gave way, 2 invisible doors opening outwards into the night. And just outside was a dark-colored van which had been backed up to the opening. Livid, my dad went about rearranging all the furniture in the room, stacking the heaviest against the outward swinging doors, and moving the mobile dresser with various loud objects behind it against the main door. When he had completed this, we all started to settle down. This was around 11 p.m. The woman brought us freshly baked blueberry muffins. Now, as I mentioned before, I don't remember much of this trip, but this is one element I have a vivid recollection of. With the inclement weather and the rush to find a place to stay, complemented by the lack of restaurants in the area, we hadn't had what one might consider a proper meal. When you're 5, dinner is very important. The muffins were fresh baked and smelled heavenly, and I wanted one more than anything else in the world. However, presuming, and probably correctly, that they were poisoned or something was seriously wrong about them, since this entire thing was beginning to feel like a horror movie. My mother absolutely forbid us from even going near them. She put them on a high shelf and sent us to bed. I was so angry. I went to bed hungry and irritable. Only 2 things happened that night that I can recall. My parents slept very lightly, when at all, as you can imagine. They claimed they kept hearing talking outside. My sister woke all of us up with a blood-curdling scream around 1 a.m. for reasons unknown. She was usually a very quiet baby. When my parents got up and milled about for an hour trying to get her back to bed, my mom noticed something on the wall as she was walking her around. and called my father over. What I would later learn was the picture hanging to one side of that door, that during the daylight seemed to be logs in a recently extinguished fire pit and a tranquil forest scene, but by night was unmistakably burning corpses with a hooded, smoky figure looming over them. We got up the next morning, packed up early, and waited for the lady to get up so we could pay and leave. While my parents were packing the bags, the woman came around back and gave my brother and I small wooden cats carved into the form of napkin holders, each a different color, and she had written little notes on. As my father was paying after loading us into the car, my mom began kicking gravel around the dirt absentmindedly. The woman came over to say goodbye and waved to us with her gapped grin, and my mother noticed that she was trying to discreetly recover the tiles that she was uncovered under the gravel. Before driving off, my mother got back out of the car and uncovered one of the tiles, and she claimed it was the same pentagram with the Third Reich symbol within it that she had seen a similar version of in that park, prompting her to notice, as we drove away, that the necklace was no longer in her purse. The likelihood of it simply falling out of the purse pocket she had placed it in was, as she put it, quite unlikely. People listening to this story seemed appalled at the fact that I still have that little wooden cat that the nice lady had given me, sitting in my bedroom. I know this all sounds very strange, but I can only assure you that it matches well with my memory of the events. And all the adults who were there tell the same story. Personally, I'm glad it's just a weird story we look back on with confusion, and that nothing stranger actually happened that night. Update. According to my mom, whom I spoke with today, it was near Millbrook, and one was a farm and the other was an old mill. I actually found the website for the B&B. It's still running, but with different owners. I don't know that I should post a link, however. They seemed like nice people who have improved it quite a lot.